G'day fans and welcome to another exciting episode of Sci-Fi Zone where we talk about science fiction stuffs. And the first thing that you'll have noticed if you haven't picked up on it already is I have a new face on the screen with me tonight. I have Alison Barton, absolute legend extraordinaire, joining us on the screen. Miss Alison, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Dex.
It's very good. It's very exciting. Now, we have to be a little bit patient with Alison. It's the first time live in front of a camera, so she had to make sure she had her hair done and the makeup on and all the rest of it, just like I do. So it's all a big thing about ensuring that we're all looking our absolute best. So, Alison, how have you been?
Very well, thank you. Enjoying lockdown. It's been great.
Very, very cool.
More time to watch sci-fi movies and shows.
Very, very cool. Now, the first thing I'm going to get you to do, because I'm going to get you to move a little bit to your right, because you're actually off center from the camera. That's better. It's all about, it's like product placement. We want everything to be in exactly the right spot at the right time, which is absolutely awesome. Now, funnily enough, we've got a whole lot of people joining us at the moment. Funnily enough, we've actually got Claire, who's normally on this episode, but Claire stepped out for tonight and she's joined in. So she's saying hello, Alison, which is kind of cool. And we've actually got Greg joining us all the way from Florida in the USA. So hopefully you can actually understand our crazy Australian accents, Mr. Greg, which is very cool. And not only that, we've actually got our number one American fan joining us from America as well. Good on you, Floyd. That is absolutely fantastic. Floyd probably joined hoping to see Claire, but sorry, Claire's not on. Alison is the star for tonight, which is awesome. All right, so we've got a very, very special night tonight. It's very, very happy that everybody's joining us because I know it is the long weekend. It's a beautiful night out and all the rest of it. But, we're here to talk about some sci-fi stuffs. And of course, the first thing I've got to ask Alison is what have you been watching in the past week or thereabouts, sci-fi related? What's been your cup of tea?
Well, I have been watching a whole lot of horror movies, but I'm not allowed to talk about them because it's no longer Halloween. And so I have just started watching Star Trek Discovery. I'm only about 3 episodes in at the moment, so I've actually been over lockdown, caught up on a whole lot of Star Trek, and so I've made my way up to Discovery.
So is it the first time you've actually watched the show?
Yes, it is.
And how have you found it so far?
Good so far. The special effects and makeup and that are really next level, which is great. I'm not a huge fan of the stylings of the Klingons as yet. They seem to have moved quite far from Klingons that we know, obviously from the original series and Next Generation and whatnot. So I'm not going to be too critical yet. Like I said, I'm only 3 episodes in, but I've sort of gone, they've taken quite a distant step from the faces we're familiar with. I will wait and see.
Good stuff. Well, you're a couple of seasons behind, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As we found, I'm going to just cover this off quite quickly. It did divide the Star Trek fan base because it's such a radically new show and so different in a lot of ways. And some people didn't like it, but other people did. But as an outsider, which in this case is yourself, be curious to see as you get further into it, what do you think of it, which is very, very cool. So good stuff. And I love this one from Greg. He said, hello, Blue Eyes. Yes, there's a nice Planet of the Apes reference. And we are going ape tonight. So for those who haven't picked up on it, we are going the full ape, which is absolutely awesome. For myself, I just got 2 things that I just want to cover off very, very quickly. I saw the trailer for Lightyear the other day has come out. Of course, this refers to Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story. I tend to not really get into trailers because they are very formulaic, but this one actually did look pretty good. Have you seen this at all, Alison?
No, I haven't. So I didn't realize there was another movie coming out.
Yeah, what's the first CG one they've done of the character, and it does look pretty good compared to the toy version from Toy Story. So, as with Pixar, they can do no wrong. They've got it all sort of like worked out quite nicely. No idea what the story's about, but visually it was very, very impressive, and it should be very interesting when it comes out. But I'm sure it'll have a lot of entertainment factor when it does, which is very, very cool. And Claire has just made a mention that a lot of people didn't like the Klingons. Yeah, I tend to think that they're great. How do you find the Klingons in good old Discovery?
Yeah, as I was saying, they have moved quite far from the familiar faces that we know, which I think the main thing for me is not that I don't like them on an individual basis, but that it's a continuity issue. So it's a little bit like the Cybermen in Doctor Who. You look at the original ones and then you look at all of the changes that they've gone through over the years, and sometimes you feel like you've stepped outside of the Doctor Who universe, or in this case the Star Trek universe, because it's different enough, that it's almost a new character instead of a familiar character. And I can see my son actually has commented Doctor Who, because yes, we've been watching some Doctor Who. We haven't watched the new episode yet because we're saving it up to watch it together after I finish this.
Is this your son?
That is, yes.
So you must be in a different room typing this stuff out. And I did find it funny. You actually said, from the Doctor Who universe. I was like, oh, my God, you got to just switch that off your brain sometimes. What can I say? Unbelievable. Very, very cool. And the only thing I just wanted to bring up, I just want to do this very quickly. I was actually contacted by a lady who was doing a school thing. I'll just very quickly, and it said her name was Tracy. Her name is Tracy Foster. Volunteers at an online education program for kids. And while they were discussing science fiction movies, they actually came across our website, which is sci-fi-zone.com. To make sure you put the hyphen in there. And apparently, one of her students, Jonah, was an ardent fan of Star Wars and found a page regarding testing surround sound systems. And so she actually asked me to at least mention this in the show and put it on the website. So I'm just doing this very quickly, but if you're interested in surround sound systems, as you can see, there's the link there, the enclaveaudio.com. It's a blog thing. So well done to her for finding that. And of course, well done for Jonah for, or at least looking at our site, which is very, very, very cool. Mr. Greg has got a question already about looking for the spaceship from the Planet of the Apes. Now, here's a question for you. Do you know, off the top of your head, Alison, do you know the name of the ship?
No, that's it. I failed the trivia quiz tonight.
Well, it's actually got two names. It was unofficially known as the Icarus. That's the ship that Taylor and the crew land in. But apparently it's been made as a model kit, and they've called it Liberty One or something like that. But it is referenced in Rise of the Planet of the Apes when the ship's launching in the background, which is very, very cool. Which, of course, brings us to the topic of our conversation. Now that we've got our other stuff out of the way, we are here to celebrate good old Planet of the Apes. And so there are going to be people watching this who are huge fans of the series, some people who may not know much about it at all. But if for those who don't know, it all kicked off with, of course, a book, the old Monkey Planet, which is kind of ironic because the word monkey in the Planet of the Apes universe is considered an insult. So we've both read the book. So, hang on. We've got, look at this. Hang on, hold that up, back up again. Look at that. Oh, very, very cool. Yes. Very groovy. Now, you've obviously read the book, as have I. What are your thoughts on the book and the story?
Very dry. So, obviously, I'm being a sci-fi fan, quite widely read. I came to the book after the movie, and I did find it very dry, in the style of a lot of Asimov's stuff. So, somebody who might have been from a writing perspective, Pierre Boulle, who's the French guy that wrote it, may be very good with technical stuff, but perhaps could have done with some assistance with character development and a little bit more flesh to the universe. I don't really know much about the rest of his works. He's well known for writing The Bridge on the River Kwai. His background is French military. And obviously Bridge on the River Kwai is a very well-known popular and successful novel and movie. Now I know we're going to get into the film adaptations, but often when you go and see a movie, you say, oh, it wasn't as good as the book. In this instance, I'm firmly in the camp of they made the right decisions with the changes they made with the movies, because the book otherwise wouldn't have translated very well to the screen.
Yeah, the funniest thing, of course, being a French novel, in the book, the aliens, Christ, I'm thinking of freaking Doctor Who. The apes are being taught how to speak French, so I can't imagine a chimpanzee going ooh la la or sacre bleu, but it'd be kind of funny. Now, so good old Sans, no spoilers. I'm afraid you're going to cop lots of them tonight. We're just celebrating the show. We can't do that without giving spoilers. And I thought this is Alison's son, right? And he's actually made a mention. Oh, he actually didn't know you actually had the book and he wants to read it. He's actually in the other bedroom watching this show. Oh,
and I think he means no spoilers about Doctor Who. He's seen Planet of the Apes, so. Oh,
jeez, bloody freaking. We've got to get off the Docky Who thing, mate. This was made long before. Actually, no, it wasn't. Docky Who was first, but let's not worry about that. With the book Monkey Planet, yeah, it's an interesting story. And of course, you might, as you said, it's a bit of a dry read, I suppose. But when you get to the very end, you go, oh, wow, I did not see that coming. It's got the ultimate twist ending, which is absolutely, oh, Christ, awesome. And even Greg King is one of our regular, I'm thinking of Doctor Who. Oh, my God. Let's move on to something exciting. All right, so we're talking about the movie adaptations. Now, of course, not everybody will know exactly what it is that they produced at the time. So It all kicked off, and obviously in 1968 with the original film, Planet of the Apes, right? That's pretty straightforward. Everybody knows that. But then there were 4 sequels that came out almost like 1 year apart from each other. So continuing the timeline from the original movie, there was Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And that was like they thought, beauty, we'll finish the entire series off. We're done. We're dusted. Pack up. Go home. And then, of course, they come up with the idea of this time travel story where they travel back to the 1970s, which is contemporary time, for escape at the Planet of the Apes. Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and which led into the next story, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, which then led into another story set like millions and billions of years in the future, give or take, which, of course, was Battle for the Planet of the Apes. And that was a series. So as you can see, they churned them out pretty damn quickly. So from there, they actually produced a TV series in 1974, which ran for a couple of seasons, and that was quite cool. The difference was in this story is that the apes and the humans actually sort of get along, at least our particular heroes. And if you're saying, why is Cornelius in this particular show? It's not. It's Galen, played by Roddy McDowall, who we'll see later, appeared in just about everything regarding Planet of the Apes. Then in 1975-76, you had the animated series Return to the Planet of the Apes. And apparently the people who made this put a lot of time and effort into the stories. And the continuity within the animated series was really, really cool. But the coolest thing, or the most interesting thing about it, is that unlike being in a primitive ape society like you saw in the movies, in the animated series, their civilization was actually quite advanced, which is how it appeared in the book. So they're actually able to copy what the book did, because in the live action movie, they clearly didn't have a budget to represent an ape city like this. So the animated series was actually more correct to the book than the original movie was. And of course, the 2001 film did a similar thing later on, which Tim Burton just made off his own cuff. It was just a sort of a remake of sorts, just completely independent, and away we went. And then, of course, we finally get to the trilogy that came out in 2011, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn, and War, which was a nice collective group regarding how the movies were made then. But let us go back in time a little bit to see how it all came about. And Alison, so how did the first movie come about?
How did the first movie come about? Or what are my impressions?
The dudes involved. Who were the dudes?
Oh, well, I know the screenwriters were Michael Wilson and Rod Serling, based off Pierre Boulle's novel. I think you've got the information about the producer.
Yeah, I do. Oops, sorry. There we go. One button too many. Yep, Arthur P. Jacobs. Yeah, he was the guy who produced it all. So, anything you want to say?
Not about the production of it. That's sort of not. I was leaving that over to you. I have made some notes about the costuming and the impression. And you mentioned the first series obviously was 5 movies, which was something new at that time insofar as it wasn't the typical done thing to, we've had a successful movie, let's make a sequel. Then you might get remakes, and especially remakes from popular novels. But the idea of sequels as an independent, brand new screenplay that's based off original characters from a book was something relatively new, and of course something that is now really commonplace. So if we've got any newer or younger people in the audience tonight, what they consider, everybody makes sequels these days. This was really one of the first movies that did that. And it was also really, really groundbreaking in terms of its makeup and special effects, which I can launch straight into that now if you want to, Dags.
All right, I'm just going to slow you down there. So for those who don't know, I took my bastard pills and I just put Alison completely on the spot, because that's what I do. Because I said, everybody's watching live. People from the other side of the world are watching Alison just completely freeze up. So, yeah, you're right. There was a lot of sagas trying to get the movie made in the first place with Rod Serling and Arthur P. Jacobs. And the interesting thing is, if you look at this photograph and you go, well, okay, that's who he is. Who's the lady? She looks unbelievably familiar. And we'll discuss that later on, because she actually pops up in the films. There are some questions. I'll get to your makeup section in a second, because that's a bit of a big deal. So good on you, Gavin. Yeah, we're going ape shit. Absolutely. Greg has asked, do we own any props or costumes for the movies? I certainly don't. I assume you don't. But now that we've gone through the movies just quickly and very, very briefly, do you have a favorite? Because I know I do.
I think the original really is probably my favorite, although it's also difficult. It's one of those things that we've got an original series now and we've got the new series, so you kind of have to pick a favorite from both. The original certainly left a huge impression on me. So the original film series all came out just before I came about in this world. And I would have seen the original movie on TV a few times. And also, I think, at the Bulleen Drive-In. So back in the days when we had drive-ins all over Melbourne. And we used to go down there every so often with the parents. And that was a bit of experience in the giant big screen. And so it does leave an impression. And then I wasn't actually aware that there were 4 other movies until the mid-'80s. And we got stuck at a friend's place in America. We'd gone on holidays in America, and then there was some Libyan air crisis or something, and our flights home got cancelled. And while we were trying to organise how to get home and stuck for things to do, my friends were sort of, oh, well, we've got these movies. I'm like, there's more movies? And that was just mind-blowing for me, especially the way that they sort of wrap around and make a complete story. The second one, not so much. The second one, as you said before, is designed to conclude the story, but then the other 3 sort of pick up and they take it back in a circle. It's like, oh my goodness, this is so clever. On a little, my 11-year-old brain, as it was at the time. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Yeah, Claire agrees. I do have a knack of putting people on the spot, and what can I say? It's live. I got to make someone feel a bit squeamish from time to time. There are a couple of other questions that I'm going to get to. So for myself, I loved Escape from Planet of the Apes. It was absolutely awesome. What happens if you get aliens who turn up in this world in a rocket ship that you've launched, and they come back and they're not who you thought you'd left? Like you get apes turning up and they're actually able to communicate, mix with society. How does humanity and the current world deal with that? I thought that the way they tackled that was absolutely fantastic. It's really, really cool. Very, very dramatic and intense. And of the 3 new movies, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is like one of my favorites. So, yes, very, very cool. Now, there are a few other things coming up. So Floyd actually said he loved the animated series. They did say it was actually really good. The only thing that let it down was the animation style was very primitive. And that's one of the reasons why it probably didn't last as long as it should have, only 13 episodes. So, but as we said earlier, the stories on it were actually quite good. And Glenn has asked if you can get the cartoon series on DVD. I don't know, to be frankly honest with you. It wouldn't surprise me if you could, but they wouldn't have been in print for quite a long time. There was a question here. Claire asked, was the Statue of Liberty in the book? It wasn't. What?
I'll just say I'll field that question.
Go for it.
So, no, it wasn't, but it was set in France. So the ending of the book, and yet warning, spoilers, and I'm probably going to give away the endings. Spoilers! No! I'm going to give away the ending of all the movies. But at the end of the book, when Taylor comes back with Nova and their son, they land at the Eiffel Tower in France. Then the end of the Tim Burton movie is more similar insofar as when Mark Wahlberg's version of Taylor arrives back and he goes, fantastic, I've made it home. I'm here at the Lincoln Memorial and the whatever that pool of tears or whatever it's called. And then the cars come screaming up and he thinks he's going to be rescued and the cops step out of the car and they're gorillas. That's basically the end of the book, except it all happens at the Statue of Liberty. Though I will say that is also my experience of the Lincoln Monument, which I visited a couple of months before the Tim Burton movie came out, because I think some kid on a school excursion had left their bagged lunch behind, and the police officer comes up, oh, does this bag belong to you? No, I don't know whose it is. And, being Australian, you just go, eh. And the next thing I know, there's cop cars pulling up. And so when I saw the end of the movie, it's like, of course, that's what happens when you visit the Lincoln Memorial.
Very cool. Jeff Rowe has said you can get the animated series on DVD. As I said, it doesn't surprise you. You can get the live action series on DVD. I know that for a fact. So there you go. And a lot of people haven't seen it. So Grant said he's never seen it. A lot of people haven't. As I said, it was made in the 70s. 13 episodes came and went, and nobody thought much of it after that. So very cool. Actually, I'd forgotten a lot. I remember the very, very end of the book, but I'd forgotten all that other stuff. So that was actually kind of cool. It's also worth noting that the film was intended to be an anti-nuclear war movie because in the 60s, of course, there was this huge panic about freaking people pressing the button. The Vietnam War was on and all the rest of it. So the world was in a pretty negative place, whereas I don't think Monkey Planet was intended to sort of follow that logic. So that's the reason why if you want people to go, oh, it's an anti-war movie, you'll show a really iconic image in the movie, which is exactly what they did. All right, so we're going to move on to the makeup, which is something you're very, very excited to talk about. So off you go, on the spot.
Yeah, so groundbreaking makeup that it had never been done quite this way before. So the chief makeup artists were, and I did write this down.
You can't find the notes now.
I can't find my notes. I've written so many notes.
I'll just make a joke up while we're waiting. Now we say, here about the two apes that
was,
tried to walk into a bar. Sorry, go on. I cut you off. Go on.
It was Tom Berman and somebody. This is terrible. I'll find it in my notes.
My name is Mr. Somebody.
They had up to 60 people on set at any given time to do all of the makeups for all of the principal actors, obviously. So the principals had more artists working on them, devoted to them, but with all of the extras and the other apes that were on set, they had up to 60 makeup artists on set at any given time. And as you can see from the pictures, and when you watch the movie in particular, because you can see their faces move, it was more than just a mask. It was layers and layers of work so that they could emote proper facial expressions, and they could talk. Obviously, all the dialogue was dubbed over later, but so that they could get a proper interaction and emote on screen, it was important for them to have prosthetics that would allow them to do that. And they won some Academy Awards for that as well. And interestingly, the 2001 A Space Odyssey was also nominated for its ape makeup, if you're familiar with the beginning of that movie. But so many people thought that they were real apes in 2001, they didn't win. Planet of the Apes won. Although you can also argue that the characters in Planet of the Apes are not meant to be apes as we know them. They're meant to be a future evolved species. So for points for creativity, they're well worthy of the Academy Award anyway. And they went on to inspire a whole generation of makeup artists and special effects people, the likes of Rick Baker and Stan Winston, who we know from films like Terminator and Star Wars. And Rick Baker was actually one of the chief designers on the 2001 Tim Burton Planet of the Apes. And each time the films have been redone, if you will, they break new ground in special effects and or makeup. So even the most recent series, which I hear sometimes referred to as prequels, like they're prequels to the original 5 series, and I think, no, they're not really. Different story. They used on-set motion capture. So previously, whereas that had always been done in a studio, new and improved techniques enabled them to actually capture that motion on set, which again makes a dramatic difference to how the characters interact with their environment, led by the fabulous Andy Serkis, of course. And obviously a lot more CGI in those latter 3 films. So I'm not really sure how much, and they probably don't want you to know either, I'm not really sure how much of what we see in the final product of the 3 most recent films is makeup and how much of it is CGI. But certainly there's a lot more man hours of makeup and prosthetics in the first series of movies.
I just want to backtrack a little bit about the Statue of Liberty. The Vile come up with a grouse one because you forget the Statue of Liberty was actually made in France and shipped over to New York. So that's a nice little kind of connection there, old son. So well done. Very, very cool. So Greg has asked about collecting Planet of the Apes memorabilia. We're actually going to discuss that a little bit later on. So sit tight there, Mr. Greg. I know you're over in Florida and you probably got to do exciting things, but we are getting there. So very, very cool. So yes, regarding like the makeup and like even at this time, so it's hard to imagine like this is the first movie. It was really cutting edge. Like even the background characters all look good, and that's one thing that the film did very, very well. They didn't skimp on people in the background and in the distance and all the rest of it. And you actually really did believe that this was the real thing. And it was very, very impressive. And as you said, it sort of just like started the entire industry effectively, which is still continuing effectively today in one form or another. Now, the other thing you wanted to talk about was the outfits. Is that right?
Oh, that was part and parcel of talking about the makeup artists. John Chambers was the other chief makeup artist. And
is that it?
That's it.
Okay, cool. No worries. So the interesting thing about the entire story, and this is you can almost relate it to today to a large degree, is how the society was structured. So you had three distinct classes: the chimpanzees, the gorillas, and the orangutans, right? And there was no way they could mix. And you can actually refer that to modern day society if you say, well, you've got European Caucasians, African Americans, maybe Asians, I don't know, just as a thing. And the only thing that links them all together is the fact that they're all the same species, but they clearly have, different mindsets. So the chimpanzees are the educated group, if you will, like the scientists. The gorillas are the military, while the orangutans are the leaders and the intellectuals. And so you could almost ask yourself, well, if you were a chimpanzee and you wanted to join the gorillas, could you do it? Man, I'm working on the view that you probably couldn't, because it's inbuilt in your brain to say, no, that's just not my cup of tea. Whereas if you're a gorilla, you'd be saying, well, I'm already aggressive. By default, I want to join the military. And if you're an orangutan, you'd be looking at the other two going, well, they're just lower class citizens. So it was a very interesting way of structuring their particular society. So, and of course, that carried right through the entire, all the movies, which was very interesting. Now, sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, just going to say, comments from the set, the filming, was that the actors tended to, for whatever reason, lunch in their particular ape groups. It was quite funny that they spent all day hanging out with their own kind, but then when they took a lunch break, it was almost like they still couldn't mix. They just had to hang out with their own kind.
Yeah, that was a very interesting observation that a lot of people said. They said, oh, the chimps will hang out over here, and they're just the actors, right? And that includes the extras as well. So you could almost put that down as a bit of a cultural study as to why that would be the case. And you'd be thinking, if I got my lunch tray and I'm dressed as a chimpanzee, even though I can't see myself, I just automatically gravitate to these dudes over here. And of course, you do wonder if any of the extras said, I've actually forgotten who I am. And what am I? Well, one of those guys or those guys? Or if you went to the wrong table where they all just look at you and growl and you go, oh, yeah, okay, I'm supposed to be over here. So, yeah, it's a very, very interesting scenario. Now, there's one thing that you wanted to bring up regarding Charlton Heston in the original movie. Is that correct? You believe he appears as an ape himself. Is that right?
Yes. So this is a story that I've heard, and I don't know if it's true, but I do like to believe that it's true. And it is that during one of the makeup tests, for whatever reason, whether it was something to do with one of the storylines that they were playing with, but they never went that way, but that they actually had Charlton Heston made up as one of the gorillas. So towards the beginning of the hunting of the humans, there's this gorilla that we can see on horseback here that is apparently Charlton Heston. So if you know that that's him under the makeup, because I've looked at it and I've gone, yeah, it could be him, but I'm not 100% sure. But if you know that apparently that's him, you get this nice shot of him, looking at him and eyeing himself off. So, I don't know. It's a nice, cute little Easter egg in the movies. We all like Easter eggs.
I love the idea of his eyeing himself off. And I actually watch that sequence, and it does work, because even though you see Charlton Heston run into the bushes and the horses go past and they turn around, when they cut to that dude, it was actually an edit. So they could have physically done it. So, yeah, we're going to get to that in a second, Mr. Grant, about Heston being in the Tim Burton version. So there you go. All right, so the thing we're going to look at is how the timelines work. So for those who have looked at the entire franchise, and this is just the movies, because the TV series is just too hard to figure out, right? It's like, how do all the timelines work? It's an absolute brain spin sometimes. So as an example, we're looking at it here. So if you're looking at the original series, it all starts with the first movie, Planet of the Apes. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. No dramas, no hassles. It's all good. It's set in the distant future, yada, yada, yada. There's been wars and shit and whatever. So what happened to society here at the time to get to where they ended up? So in the original version, all the cats and dogs, actually it's covered by the logo, all the cats and dogs all die out. So what happens if there's been a disease, all people on Earth, like today, for example, lose all of their pets. So suddenly there's no domestic animals anymore. So apes are then trained to be replacements as pets. And this is covered off in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Right. And then, of course, once people realize, they can actually do things, they're then trained to be servants. Okay. And that's how the whole ape civilization starts to integrate itself into human society, right? Now, because Caesar has traveled, but he's born from a speaking ape, which is Cornelius and Zera in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. By conquest, he's the only ape who can speak. And through him, he then somehow allows the others to learn speech. Now, they don't really cover it in detail as to how that works, but that's the mindset, right? And of course, as we know, somewhere down the track, to fit in this timeline, humans are all destroyed in a massive nuclear war that destroys everything, and apes become the dominant life form, and in the process, humans become mute. And it's because it's a circular timeline. It's hard to know when the timeline sort of branches off, but that's roughly what is supposed to happen, right? And what the interesting thing, of course, as we mentioned, is Cornelius gives birth to Caesar, right? That's all very cool. Now, if you look at the rise of the Planet of the Apes trilogy, they do things a little bit differently. So in their timeline, right, the cats and dogs don't die, so that's not an issue. Caesar and the apes gain intelligence through drug testing because they're trying to prevent a disease on humans, and they're testing on the apes, and in the process, that actually boosts their intelligence, and that's where Caesar comes from, and Cobra and all the others. And most humans actually die off because of the virus that they've created, which is ALZ113. And in the process, those who survive down the track, they end up becoming mute. So that sort of links into what happens with the original Planet of the Apes movie. Now, they're completely different mindsets and different stories, and of course, Caesar actually gives birth to Cornelius, which is complete opposite to what happened in the original series. But both of them all match up with Battle for the Planet of the Apes, which is set in the distant future where apes and humans are now living together harmoniously. So, as you write, Alison, the new movies are not a prequel to the original. There are some similarities, but ultimately they don't link up because the original series dealt with the future and the present at the same time. So it's a bit of a mind spin if you're trying to get it all to fit together, and it doesn't actually work. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. I have really enjoyed the new series for the most part. I think War for the Planet of the Apes dragged in bits, but I really like the new angle that they took with that and with the storyline. And as you correctly pointed out, you look at the 1960s Cold War. Yeah, the warning was against let's not blow this planet up, with nuclear weapons. So they did change the ending of the book, and that was Rod Serling's idea, and it works much, much better for the movies. I really, and in the new series, wanted to see them make a fourth movie, because there's lots of little bits and pieces that they have set up, and there's lots of parallels to the original series as well. But even in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, you've got the little bit in the background about the astronauts going off to space and their ship's gone missing. And I'm thinking, I'm really interested to see what they would do with a fourth movie, and perhaps kind of bring it around. Wouldn't be circular in the same way that the original movies were, but just to see what happens with the astronauts in this version when they come back to the planet. It's got to be different. Ultimately, it's got to be different because the beginning's been different and there'd be no surprise reveal ending. But I just I want to see the ending to the story. I still feel like I haven't seen the ending to that version of the story.
Very cool. Eds has mentioned there could be an echo from when I'm speaking, and Claire has actually mentioned it as well. So, Alison, I don't know how loud your speakers are at your end, but just if you can check that, please, because I'm not getting anything at here. So, if your audio is too loud, the microphone will be picking it up. So, okay, so there you go. Gavin's asked about if any of the human characters got to wear the ape makeup. Yes, they did, and I'll get to that in a second. So, very, very cool. All right, so let's look at some of the characters, and this is mainly from the original series, you could say. So, how's this for a bit of a funny situation? So, with the good guys, for example, you got Cornelius from the original two movies, except for Beneath. He was in all the others, Galen and Caesar, and they're all played by Roddy McDowall. And the only reason he couldn't do Beneath the Planet of the Apes is because he was busy in England directing a film of his own. So good old Roddy was the mainstay of the entire series. He was just everywhere, and everybody loved him. And it was almost like without Roddy, there was no ape films. And for those who are wondering, no, he did not do the voice of his Cornelius in the animated series. Someone else did, right? So, but yeah, he did very well for himself. And then, of course, to answer the question about whether humans got to wear the ape makeup, so Natalie Trundy, who was actually married to Arthur P. Jacobs, it's almost like the Majel Barrett Roddenberry scenario. I'm married to the boss, so therefore I get some screen time. So she played Albina in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Stephanie Branton in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and she was excellent in that. And then she finally got to don the ape makeup as Lisa in Conquests. So it's one of those very, very subtle sort of connections that she finally got to say, oh, yes, I actually want to be an ape. And they put her in as Lisa. And Lisa is a very, very timid character, completely different to, say, Stephanie Branton in the movie that was previous to that. So did you actually know that at all?
No, No, I didn't know that. Hard to tell who's who underneath all of the makeup. But
Very,
there
very
you
cool.
go.
No worries. Good stuff. And also another key thing, which is actually kind of funny, is that Kim Hunter, of course, played Zero, and Zero was like the most popular character in terms of female apes throughout the series. And I don't know if you even knew this, but apparently all the ape actors had to wear brown contact lenses because they wanted to, simians actually have dark eyes. But with Kim Hunter, they actually kept her eyes as natural. She has like hazel eyes, and they wanted to give her a more of a human connection, which I thought was actually quite interesting. And in fact, because Charlton Heston never saw her without her makeup, even after 3 months of filming, when Kim Hunter approached him at the cinema at the premiere, he had no idea who she was. Yeah, she was. So how freaking trippy is that? So, dear, very, very cool. So there you go. Good stuff. What do you reckon? Yeah.
Sounds good. I do believe there was a couple of actors that played different ape characters through the evolution of the original movies as well. Obviously, you've got Roddy McDowall, but various apes playing sons or nephews of other characters, and they turn up again, and why not? What's the best way to get somebody who looks like their relation? And I think some of the humans in the last one, the Battle for the Planet of the Apes, had previously played apes as well. So they do a lot of that, paying homage to each other, and you see a little bit of that in the new films as well. Some of the dialogue, get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape, and I think a couple of the props got reused. It's a nice little nod to the original, kind of saying, we couldn't have done it without you guys. The original and the best, so little tip of the hat.
Yep, and I agree, Greg. Film bloopers. I think, look, all this stuff's available. There's a really good behind the documentary. I've forgotten what it's called now. When they interviewed a lot of the cast about the making of the movies, because it was a very iconic when they came out. It was such a revolutionary thing, as I said earlier, that there was really nothing like it. And Gavin said about, did any of the prosthetics fall off? Probably not. I wouldn't to see be the case. But I did hear a story that with the actors when they're having lunch, they had to be in front of a mirror so they could actually see themselves if they had damaged anything. That'd be kind of funny. You'd be thinking there's another dude there, and it's actually you. So it would be easier to go to the makeup artist saying, "Oh, I've damaged this, or I've done this, or whatever else," rather than just feeding yourself. And I also think they actually had to use tubes, because obviously your mouth is back here and your face is out here. That they had to have a lot of liquid foods as well, which is kind of interesting. So they were the good guys. That was pretty rough. So in terms of bad guys, you got to have your adversaries, right? So. There was no adversaries in Planet of the Apes. Actually, the bad guys, if you will, there weren't any, which is kind of funny. But in beneath the Planet of the Apes, you had Ursus. So the gorillas are really starting to make their appearance now. And Ursus, that's where he sort of came into the scheme of things. Aldo, of course, was in Battle of the Planet of the Apes. And, of course, what's interesting with him is he was first referenced in Conquest, which is the movie before this one, but he was a chimpanzee. So somewhere along the way, I think he was always meant to be a gorilla. But somewhere in the writing of the Conquest, they thought, no, we don't want a gorilla being tormented by the humans. We want a chimpanzee because they're the weakest of the three social groups. So, but apparently it's meant to be the same character, even though he's the wrong one. And of course, Aldo ends up breaking the golden rule of ape society. And do you remember what the golden rule of ape society was?
Apes together stronger.
No, ape shall not kill ape. And of course, that's exactly what Aldo does. Ape. So, yes, very interesting. And of course, in the TV series, you had Urko. So it was established in all the movies and the TV series that the gorillas were clearly going to be the antagonists for the good guys, whoever they happen to be. And they, of course, had a bit of an attitude problem. And of course, even Urko appeared in the animated series as himself. So yeah, they had a nice little run through there. And of course, in the new series of the movies, once again, there was no ape antagonist, unless you class Koba, and he was a chimpanzee later on, but he had a reason for being as unhappy as he was. Now, as I mentioned earlier about Charlton Heston, of course, he appeared in the 2001 movie as Zaius, believe it or not, the father of General Thade, but it was an uncredited role. I assume you're aware of that?
No, that's new information for me.
So
you're nerdier than I am.
That's all right. So we definitely know that that's him, and Linda Harrison, who played Nova, also appeared in the movie, but some uncredited sort of background role somewhere, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, Zaius, of course, is the intellectual leader of the Ape Society, who knows everything that's going on around the place, but isn't telling anybody. So yeah, which I thought was quite interesting. So when they got to the new movies, they obviously didn't want to use the Zaius name, so they used Maurice instead, who's named after Maurice Evans, who played Dr. Zaius. So I don't know about you, but as soon as I heard Maurice, now apparently it's pronounced Morris because it's English, not Maurice, but I say Maurice. So, yeah, what do you reckon about that?
Another nice nod there, and yeah, to me, he's Maurice as well. I can't look at that name and think that that's not Morris. It's Maurice.
Yeah, so it'd be funny if you had a Morris Minor. So Morris was Morris Minor. Yeah, there you go.
How's that song go? Some people call me the Space Cowboy.
Yeah, exactly right. And you are right, Mr. Daniel is Dr. Zaius. So exactly right. So, but yeah, and the story is that you had the sacred scrolls that were from the lawgiver, but Zaius had a few of them stashed away, and he knew more about what was going on than anybody else because his job was to protect the image of Ape Society. And of course, this is one of the most funniest images of the entire thing. Yeah, the hear no evil, speak no evil, say no evil. And apparently that was improvised. That wasn't planned. So what do you reckon of that?
No, I reckon those actors got together beforehand, and the director might have thought it was improvised or didn't know it was going to happen, but I reckon there was a bit of planning went on with that one.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you are right, Floyd. Yeah, you sort of need to watch them again. It's interesting to sort of see how the movies reflect modern day society at the time. So, as was said earlier with Escape from the Planet of the Apes, if you have apes turning up in society, how do people deal with it? It's the equivalent of aliens from another planet, right? You discover that they have intellectual capabilities and can speak. What do you do with them? How do you treat them? And everybody sees them as being celebrities and they're all loved, but there's always a side, a faction on the other side to go, no, we're threatened by them because we know that the apes are our future. So what do we do to stop that? Do we just kill them off or make them sterile or whatever else? And of course, that actually exactly is what the case is. So they give birth to Caesar. Caesar then goes into conquest of the Planet of the Apes, and away we go. And of course, Conquest, which is the film set after it, was like suddenly we've got a completely it's like totalitarian. I can't say that word. Can you say for me? Totalitarian? Is that how you say it?
Totalitarian.
There's an extra T in there. Society, where it's like the government is controlling everything, and it's all like very militaristic and very like a police state sort of thing, where they're trying to control all the apes, and of course that's why Caesar cracks the shits and then creates his own society. So in the end, you could say the humans are sort of the downfall of their own civilization, which is particularly interesting. So, but that was actually looking at how things were at the time in the early 70s. And once again, with the Vietnam War and everything going on, the movies are designed to reflect what was happening in real life society back then. So what do you reckon?
And they had that beautiful shopping mall somewhere in California that hadn't opened yet. It looked super futuristic and convenient for a location shooting for Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Looked nice and futuristic, but a future not too distant from ours.
Yeah, exactly right. So Claire's only said she's only seen a couple of them, and to be fair, they're not all good. I mean, they were churning them out pretty fast. So Beneath, which was the first sequel, was actually very disappointing. And they wanted to end the series. I don't know whose idea it was. They said, nah, let's just blow up the Earth, done. And then someone somewhere says, no, let's go back in time and let's just restart it all over again, even though the logic of how that works doesn't work. So if you know the time frame, so the ship has crashed, that's Taylor's ship, and they've all gone out and done their thing. And somewhere in the way, like in the Ape Society, they don't even believe in flight. And somewhere along the way, they've actually dug up the Icarus from wherever Taylor left it out in the desert somewhere, got it to work, stuck Zero and Cornelius in it and Dr. Milo, and then nicked off just in time before the Earth blew up. And that doesn't actually work because the time between the first movie and the second movie is only a few months. So, but whatever, suspension of disbelief, that's what it's all about. What do you reckon, yeah?
I agree. And the original Battle of the Planet of the Apes, I would have to say is the weakest of the lot because it really has real difficulty stringing the timelines together, and in fact is done partly with flashbacks, as you were, because in order for the time frames to work out, they couldn't have movies that covered all these hundreds of years that are supposed to have passed. So they sort of jumped to a bit further in the future, and they're reading from the history books about the stuff that led up to where they are now. So it all matches up in the end. But I remember when I watched that, it was kind of a bit boring, but also gets very confusing in there somewhere. And the
I tell you
timelines,
one.
you've really got to suspend disbelief for the timelines to work.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. One thing that sort of does work though, which is a bit of a bizarre one. So in the original series, the biggest deity of the entire ape society was the lawgiver, right? He had the sacred scrolls, and in the sacred scrolls, and this is mentioned in Battle of the Planet of the Apes, right? That it was actually Caesar who led the way, the apes away from human enslavement, which is a direct link to the previous movies, Escape and From Battle, right? So that's pretty cut and dry, no dramas, all good stuff. But ironically, it actually still fits within the rise of the Planet of the Apes trilogy, because in that series, that trilogy, it is Caesar who leads the apes away from human enslavement and actually creates a new society. So to a large degree, that part is actually correct. And of course, it's the lawgiver is meant to be an orangutan. So there's nothing to say that it wasn't Maurice Morris, who became the lawgiver in the new trilogy timeline, and he just writes the sacred scrolls, and then 10,000 years later, people are still reading about Caesar and all the rest of it. So it does actually fit on both of them. So it's good to see that there's something that you can actually link together, which is kind of groovy. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. They've done a nice job of linking it up. And I think the best way to describe it is that it is like two parallel versions of the same story. It's not, one's not meant to be a prequel of the other. It's a revisiting of a classic tale. Obviously couldn't go for the same surprise ending in the new series. That would be dull and no surprise at all. If anybody's familiar with the Planet of the Apes, you know about the Statue of Liberty at the end. And it has been modernized to fit with changing times. So, here we are actually in a pandemic. So scientists have been warning for years that disease is our next biggest threat as a human race. And if we don't do something about that, we're threatening our own existence with disease. And, it's really quite on track. The filmmakers and the screenplay writers are quite on track with saying, oh, look, disease is now the thing that we're going to make the focal point of this series of movies.
Yeah, it's very funny you should mention about the ending, right? So where they produced the series of the DVDs years ago, and this was on the cover, right? It's like the ultimate spoiler alert. Yeah, sorry, kids. So people who had never seen the movies at all, right? They'd be going, or they'd be watching halfway through the movie, and like Taylor's going, oh, I'm on a different planet. I don't know where I am. And anybody watching them be going, dude, you're on Earth. We saw the Statue of Liberty on the DVD cover. It's right there. So it's like, that I cried when I saw that. It's like, how could you do that? It's like freaking hell. So, yeah, that was very disappointing. But yeah,
and
what do you do?
This is one challenge that I find with my kids. I've tried to show them a lot of the sci-fi classics, and sometimes it's a matter of, all right, you got to be old enough to understand it and not find it too scary. But there's stuff that I want to show you before it gets spoiled for you. So we have watched the original series all through once, and I think at least Joshua has watched the three most recent ones, but so that hopefully they can get a little bit of the same impression that we all got when we were kids and saw it for the first time. Oh my God, oh wow, and I didn't see that coming. That's amazing. I want to ask your impression of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, which for me is very much the odd one out, and a little bit of what were they thinking when they made this one?
Yeah, I was going to spend at least a couple of minutes on that. I didn't want to spend too much time because it really is a bit of an oddity, and it just came out of absolute nowhere. I applaud the idea that they've done something different, but the moment they arrived in the future with the Ape Society and the humans spoke, I thought, oh, that's jarring me already, because in the previous movies, when the apes were dominant, the humans were mute, and they were mute for a reason, as we discussed earlier. So the fact that they could talk, communicate, and all the rest of it, I thought, oh, okay, this is a real departure from what we've seen in previous stories. I thought it was interesting, but I haven't seen it for a very, very long time. I did like with General Thade. I mean, his makeup and the way he looked was absolutely fantastic. He was really, really cool. And it was interesting that it was a chimpanzee who was the main protagonist and not a gorilla. I thought that was a very interesting sort of take on the story. And the end of it, like you said, the ending is very similar to the book. But the film producers actually said, we'll just chuck this ending in, not explain it. No one knows how it worked. Like Wahlberg's character comes back to Earth and suddenly the whole Earth is identical to today, but it's all apes everywhere. And they said, oh, who cares what it means? We'll just chuck it in anyway because it looks good. It's a great idea. It's a great way to finish it. So, I don't know. it was good, I think, for the time, but I think as the years have rolled on, people have sort of just left it behind, especially when once the new trilogy came out, and now you're right, it's the speed bump of the series. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I reckon the writers that didn't quite get it right and perhaps didn't quite understand, and they borrowed bits from the original movie, but then they borrowed bits from the book as well, and it all ends up a little bit confusing and jumbled. In the book, but once you decipher that, in the book, the astronaut, well, it's sort of a story within a story, which is what makes it really dry, and it doesn't really work anyway to begin with. But the main characters in the story, the astronaut, you've left quite clearly with the impression that he did end up on another planet, and he knows, because he's an astronaut and he can navigate, he knows he ended up on another planet. So he's definitely on another planet. And then that's kind of the big surprise at the end is, hooray, I've made it back to Earth. But so many hundreds of years have gone by, and the horrifying thing for him is he made it all the way back, and it's got the familiar landmark, the Eiffel Tower, but something somewhere along the line in evolution has happened, and he's back on a planet filled with apes. So I kind of get the impression that that's what they were trying to do with the Mark Wahlberg movie, but it's really unclear. They haven't made that clear. And because the original series is so iconic and so well known, and everybody knows that that is Earth that the astronauts have landed on, but in the future you go, well, hang on a minute, he landed on Earth and then he landed on Earth again. So unless you have read the book, it actually doesn't make any sense at all, and that makes it a weak film.
About the only thing you could do if you were to do the original movie again, and I mean, of course, a lot of people would have said, "Oh, he's crashed on this foreign planet," but they know all the landmarks. Oh, that's the Grand Canyon, and this is this lake, and that's that lake over there, and this is part of this thing over here. If you could make the entire landscape completely foreign, you change the color of the sand to red, for example, like Mars or whatever else, and it's a product of the nuclear destruction that occurred today. Everything turned red, as an example, and the apes evolved from that. Then you would say, oh, wow, that is really trippy, because then you see the Statue of Liberty at the end. You go, well, I really didn't know I was on Earth. Whereas in the film as it currently stands, you could probably guess it. Now, at the time, it was probably the equivalent of the, no, Luke, I'm your father type scenarios. Like people say, oh, my God, I've been on Earth this entire time, because they're trying to sell it that he's on another planet. But it's obviously filmed in real location. So it would have probably been, they obviously couldn't do it, but if they could do it, that would have caught everybody off guard, make the landscape truly alien. And then say, it was a byproduct of what happened when the nuclear war occurred. So, so the 2001 one, I think people just sort of took it as what it was, but it wasn't until the next trilogy came out, Rise, Dawn, and War, which was an outstanding series of movies, absolutely really well thought out, that people thought, oh, well, I'm getting dialed into this big time. And because they'd come so far in terms of the visual effects of making the apes really, really realistic, and not just limited to just prosthetic makeup, it gave him a whole new life. And Caesar and all the rest of it. It was just, outstanding. And that's the reason why I love the second movie, Dawn, because it's actually the first time that the humans have started the war. The apes started it. So Cobra shoots the human dude, and the humans think, oh, yeah, if I recall correctly. And that's where the conflict begins. So it's actually the apes that started it, and not the humans, which is in normal science fiction is exactly what happened. So I was very, very impressed with that. Anything else you want to mention before I move on to the next, something else I want to bring up?
No, fire away. Just to echo what you said about Dawn, and even though you kind of know, if you're familiar with the story, that it isn't all going to be peace, love, and mung beans between the apes and the humans, the fact that you're that invested by the end of that movie, right up until the bit where you want them to work it out, you want them to succeed, is a testament to the quality of the movies.
Totally agree. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but the one thing I do sort of want to mention is that one thing that Planet of the Apes, the series, did do, the movie series, was produce a shitload of merchandise. So it was probably one of the first movie series, there's a big word for you, that went completely nuts in terms of merchandise. Hang on, what have you got there? You got your DVD. Oh. What have you got? Oh, look at that. What the hell is it? What am I looking at? Oh, it's a what is that? Oh, it looks weird, whatever it is. It's a Planet of the Apes. I can't work out what it is, but
like
good for you.
Christmas decoration or something. I got Cornelius. I had this on my desk at work at an old workplace until my boss didn't like it, but I bought a gorilla and an orangutan for a couple of my teammates. And there you go. Make of that what you will, fellas.
Very, very cool. So, I mean, this is obviously long before any of the Star Trek stuff really took off, because at this point, Star Trek was just a TV series of only 3 seasons. And Planet of the Apes merchandise really just come up out of nowhere, and there's a whole range of classic stuff that's out and about. We may even discuss this on one of the other shows that I do, but it sort of came and then it got overshadowed by everything else that occurred in the late 70s with Star Wars and whatever else. And yes, and Doctor Who, for those who want to mention it. And it's just funny because I think there's like whole collections of this stuff just buried in people's garages somewhere. But a lot of people forget that it even existed. So it is a whole range of things, from lollies to trading cards to toy sets, the action figures, the games, the whole lot. So Planet of the Apes really actually did have a lot going for it, which was really, really impressive. So it's just one of those things a lot of people just sort of forgot about. And as you've said, you've picked up an item here, and they're still producing stuff today. And it's really, really cool. So even Gavin said he mostly remembers the trading cards. And so all that was the start of what other franchises would carry on with as time went on. And, of course, now they've just Planet of the Apes has sort of been left behind. So I find that to be quite interesting. So there's definitely a legacy that the entire series has sort of left, even though it may have been forgotten, for the most part. I mean, as we've said here, like some people haven't watched some of the TV series or the animated series or some of the movies, but they are definitely worth watching. And if you watch the movie Argo, Ben Affleck's movie, he's actually watching one of the Planet of the Apes movies, which gives him the idea of rescuing the Iranian hostages. And apparently that's based on a true story. So what do you reckon of that?
Yeah, Argo is based on a true story, and I got a funny feeling it's referenced in Argo because I believe one of the producers or somebody that was involved in making Planet of the Apes, might even be one of the art directors, got involved in the whole Argo saga, because they had to fake up that they were making a movie, so they had storyboards, they had launches, they went the whole hog, and some of the guys that worked on Planet of the Apes worked on this fake movie Argo, so that's the crossover there.
Very cool. And Jeff Rose said, the TV show had a lot of merch in the 70s. Okay. So I was just using that as an example of sort of like it all started. It's where a lot of it all sort of started. But fair enough. Absolutely awesome. And you are right, Grant. Yeah, they're re-releasing the figures. So there's still a market out there. It's not a big market, but there is still a market for it, which is absolutely fantastic. And speaking of things that are being released, even though everything's on the internet now, I just want to mention these two books that came out. These are both unauthorized by Richard Hanley, who's a huge Planet of the Apes fan. He produced his own books. One is the timeline. This doesn't cover the new movies, if I recall correctly, and the other one's like an encyclopedia. Both unauthorized. Now these days you can go to the wiki pages and all the rest of it. Probably isn't as relevant as it used to be, but I wanted to bring those up because I thought, good on the guy for just taking his own initiative, producing his own books based on Planet of the Apes, because a few years ago they were an excellent reference material, and they do cover, like in the encyclopedia, all the comics and all the rest of it. And there was a lot of stuff too, so I thought I would just chuck that in for good measure. What do you reckon, Alison? And so Jeff Rose looked it up. Yeah, it was John Chambers worked with the CIA. Yeah, exactly right, from Argo. So if you watch Argo, there's actually a bit of truth in exactly what happened. So how good is that? What do you reckon? So do you reckon people should just go out there and check out some Apely movies or what, Alison?
Definitely. If you haven't watch them all. There are some that are only worth watching once so that you can say that you've done it. The original Battle of the Planet of the Apes comes to mind, and perhaps the Tim Burton one. But, there's a bit of schlock entertainment to be had in them, even if they don't hold up as quite the quality masterpieces that the recent trilogy do. And then you can get in debates with people about whether you think they're sequels or prequels, which I've seen happen on the internet as well, because why not? Nerds love to argue.
Absolutely. And just be wary for those who are watching the third movie, War of the Planet Apes. It is a little bit intense, so it's definitely not one for the kids, but you can see a lot of the parallels with some of the earlier stories, as Alison mentioned. But as to whether they're prequels or standalones, they saw it. Some areas they are and some areas they aren't, but you're right. Let the nerds fight that one out. Which is the most important thing. And speaking of important things, it's actually time for us to, believe it or not, sign off. So we'd like to think we've sort of celebrated good old Planet of the Apes. Absolutely awesome stuff. Got to check it out. And don't forget, if you do watch the third movie, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, just imagine if it's as if it was today, right? So they're launched. What's the rocket ships that William Shatner and all those guys have been setting off as the Elon Musk bloody things. Imagine that went up there.
Orion, whatever, Blue Horizon, Orion, whatever it is.
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah. Imagine that went up there, came back 15 minutes later, and it was full of apes. Now, you can make a joke of that if you want, but imagine if that happened, right? How would the Earth deal with it, right? They're apes and they can communicate and they speak English and all the rest of it, not French. And that would just like drive everybody completely bananas. Some people would love it and some people wouldn't. And that's the reason why the third movie is one of the best of the entire series in my view. So there you go. Any final words before we sign off, Miss Allison, for tonight?
Thanks for having me. That's
Absolutely fantastic job. Sorry, what was that?
I said time's up.
Yeah, I was going to say hi, Mum, but your son's saying that in the other room, so which is very, very cool. All right, time for us to bail out. So thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you next week. And in the interim, go Ape. Bye for now.